This is Abe, and this is the NYC Taxi News podcast. Some of the topics we'll get to today concern the latest TLC and NYC Council Transportation Committee hearings, the impending American Transit Insurance insolvability, whatever that word is, insolvency. TLC rule changes for wheelchair accessible taxis, and they voted on it yesterday. Okay. Is there enough money in the TIF to pay for them, to pay for the Uber Lyft driver deactivations? Okay. That's not good. Commuter van rule changes on hailing charges in maximum speed rules and autonomous vehicles. Now that's the autonomous vehicles. I want to start with that. Okay, I'm gonna say the things I've been thinking. Okay, there are three articles I read last week. Okay, that I put on NYC Taxi News. One is about robocars and Elon Musk and his 42 zillion robocars he wants to put on. In fact, there was another article today where he says he's going to get rid of all taxi drivers and put them out of work. He's saying that, if he could send rocket ships to Mars, this guy might be able to do that. All right. And another article about accidents, about taxis or any vehicles, any automobiles that kill people on the street and because they don't drive carefully. All right. And that's terrible. And I myself would like to see a way to keep these people from hurting people. Okay. Because I drove, many, many years a taxi cab, and believe me, and even where I am now, the way these people drive, it's something has to be done about it. Okay. And then these new speed rules. Now, from what I understand, below Canal Street, all the streets are going to be 20 miles an hour limit. Okay. Now, it's almost impossible to go to not go more than 20 miles an hour. Okay, because all you got to do is step on the gas, and you're already doing 25. Okay, so what I'm thinking is all of these things are being planned for the future to just have autonomous vehicles and set them to the speed limit, and have these vehicles be so smart that they can never hurt anybody, et cetera, et cetera. So, I want to get your thoughts on that, you and Carolyn. Go.
I would just say, as a person who walks around in Manhattan a lot, there are vehicles going over 25 miles an hour, but it's the motorized bicycles. They go faster than the cars. And isn't the 20 mile an hour speed limit for everywhere?
No, it's
not just below. It's just below Canal Street.
No, well, the article said that they passed the rules for. Well, it's a section in Brooklyn. They first did it on Bedford Avenue. Okay, it's called the Sammy's Law. A kid got killed.
Right.
All right, and look, if you're on a private street, to go 20 miles an hour is a good idea. I'm not saying it's a bad idea, but you can't if you continue to say, well, let's do these streets and let's do these streets and the next thing you know, you're on Park Avenue and you got to go 20 miles an hour, or you're on Second Avenue and you go 20 miles an hour. Okay, it's not possible unless if they just change the light switch that you can't get more than a block at a time. Okay, so where is this leading to? Is what I want to know. I want to know, is this leading to where if you, first of all, they'll throw all the police out there on the street. Okay, they'll be writing tickets all day long. Okay, or taking pictures, with cameras. All right, and before you know it, your license is gone. You've gone 25 miles an hour too many times.
Just to jump in reality, I think I agree. Like, it's interesting that they keep on lowering the speed limits. I think they don't give you a ticket until you're 11 miles per 10 miles over the speed limit. So if the speed limit is 20 miles per hour, I think they're going to give you a ticket when you're going 31 miles per hour. I mean,
That's a nice thought, but you know, they don't have to do that.
and everything is caught on camera these days.
But what I'm saying is they're designing things so that in the future there'll be no more drivers.
Well, yeah, I mean, did you see the Fifth Avenue reveal? I don't know if you guys saw that today. The new proposal, they're going to take, I think there's 5 lanes on Fifth Avenue. They're going to shrink it to 3 lanes with 1 dedicated bus lane. And there's, you know, other initiatives to make, you know, the return of boulevards, pedestrian boulevards. I actually think that's a good thing for I have a kind of a variant view on this. I think that's a good thing for the for-hire vehicle and taxi sector. I think they might be killing, they don't want private passenger vehicles in cities anymore. I think they don't mind for-hire vehicles that transport multiple people a day, but I think they don't want private passenger. I mean, who needs to drive outside a city? Like, how many people actually need to drive through Manhattan, if you think about it? Like, what's your thoughts on that?
Well, private cars in Manhattan should have been dealt with a long time ago. Okay, most of them, you know, if you can take a subway into Manhattan, you don't need to drive there. Okay, but what I'm getting at is this is all a plan for the future to only have driverless cars.
I think it's
Okay.
it's a plan. There's an element of that, yes, and it's logical how you're like deducing that. You have to remember there's a big contingent of lobbyists and people who actually it's not even about autonomous cars. They don't want cars. You know, like, it's not even about
if they have
cars.
cars, they should. It's not the government that wants to, or the TLC or whatever, that wants to change it so that there's no more drivers. It's the manufacturers of these cars, such as Elon Musk. He's manufactured thousands of these cars.
No,
okay?
but Elon Musk still fundamentally wants cars. He doesn't want he wants to make money on robotaxis. But what I'm saying is some people actually just don't want cars on the streets, so pedestrians can kind of take the streets back.
Look, I have had in my career, if I say I only had 1 million, I'd be a million passengers. You know, I mean, I've had millions of passengers over the years, and these people want taxis. They want to be in cars. They don't want to go on the subway. Okay, they don't want to take buses.
Oh, 100%. What I'm saying is that obviously it's going to be a balance of all things. I think I guess what my view on this is that they are targeting private passenger vehicles versus for-hire vehicles right now. Like, the first cars to go will be private passenger vehicles, will actually benefit, you could argue, taxis and for-hire vehicles. Do you I think that's how it might play out. I could be wrong. I mean,
look, this is the year 2024, right? I'm talking about 2035, 2050. You know, should I live that long? I don't think. Okay. Unless they find some serum for me to stay alive forever. Okay, but they want in the future to only have cars without drivers. So they can control those cars to go the speed.
Let me ask you this, and hopefully Abe, hopefully you live to 100 years old, by the way. Yeah. We're all rooting for you, to celebrate 100.
That's coming in another 25 years.
No, but I mean, Carolyn, I'd like to get you. I mean, let's go. Carolyn, what are your thoughts before we go too deep into this? What are your thoughts on this?
I once asked Charlie Komanoff, the transportation expert, who is driving into Manhattan? Who are these people? And he said he didn't know, which I'm not sure if I believe that, but I think a lot of the people who drive in are city employees, cops, firefighters, teachers, Department of Education people, controller's office, all the different agencies. I think a lot of those people drive in. And you're going to have a problem, because they don't want to pay congestion fees, that's for sure. There was even some murmurings before the governor postponed instituting the congestion fees that, well, maybe we'll try to exempt city employees. I mean, you're going to be left with almost nobody to pay those fees. It's just, we're not well organized. We're just not at that point where any of this is going to work. I do have some thoughts on the commuter van and hailing bill that's floating around to allow commuter vans to do street hails. Now, it doesn't say anywhere in that bill that this shall be limited to the boondocks of, far Queens or Brooklyn. It doesn't say that. And we also know there's only about 30-something licensed commuter vans out there. If I looked at the law, they're authorized to have a little over 800 of them. And in this bill, it says maybe we should take a look at the numbers because we might want to increase it, meaning 800 isn't enough. So I wonder if they have like some secret plan to increase the number of commuter vans by a very large amount, and maybe they'll put them on Fifth Avenue.
Well,
as I said, there's nothing in the law that says they can't put it on Fifth Avenue.
I think if you see if you saw the city council hearing, is that the reason that's going to be difficult is you got two contingents against too many commuter vans.
Yeah, I know. The workers for the MTA.
Right.
Yeah.
The MTA is like, wait, hold up. Like now you're competing directly with public transit. So
duh.
We're against this. Right. Then you have, to be fair to the TLC, David Doe did clearly state in his testimony that we're only for outer borough street hails. Right.
So what? So what? He doesn't make any decisions.
Well,
he's just a cog in the works.
It's the outer boroughs that don't need the street hails. It's Manhattan that needs the street hails. The outer boroughs would work fine with app calls and.
No, the outer boroughs commuter vans, they do work with street hails. You just stand there in the street and you pick up your hand. Maybe you wave $2 at the guy. I don't know exactly how they do it, but those are street hails.
I think, to be fair, I think what they're trying to do is it's happening anyways. Like, I don't know the areas that well. Maybe
right.
You guys know. It's like West, it's like Far Rockaway, these type of areas. I'm not too familiar with them, but these are like transit deserts, and like I guess they're doing it anyways. Like they're
right.
Far Rockaway, I know Far Rockaway very well. Okay, and places like that need to be able to call on the phone or do an app call. Okay, but in Brooklyn, if you're shopping on Flatbush Avenue, down by Church and Flatbush Avenue, okay, that area, I grew up over there. Yeah, you could go out on the street and hail taxis. I've done a lot. I did a lot of street hails in Brooklyn in my career. Okay, even in Queens on Northern Boulevard, you get street hails.
But those are expensive. But those are expensive. These guys are paying. These are dollar van. They can't afford a taxi street hail over there. I like a lot of these. This consumer contingent is looking for super cheap kind of private public transport, if that makes sense, with commuter vans.
Well, look, no, it doesn't. Because well, look, you could have both. I mean, you could have a commuter van for people that just want to go straight where the van's going. But if you're in Queens, say on Queens Boulevard, I got thousands of street hails there when I was.
Yeah, but that's not happening anymore. That was like 10, 15, 20 years ago. I don't think that really happens now. And getting back to the commuter vans, I think one of their biggest problems is insurance. And then if they start doing officially street hails, the insurance goes up because I think insurance is cheaper if you're doing prearranged with known customers. And if you're just picking up random people on the street, then the insurance is going to cost more. I don't think the business model works unless there's subsidies, which I think there will be, because there is a bill that was passed by the New York State Assembly and Senate for captive insurance companies to provide insurance to prearranged vans and FHVs. I'm not sure about how taxis fit into that or if they do it all. The bill is awaiting Kathy Hochul's signature. So
Yeah, she
I
vetoed.
suppose
She
that means
vetoed. Yeah, she
they're going
vetoed
to
that
insure
last year, I
themselves.
believe. Yeah.
But they won't be able to do that without major subsidies from New York State. And, then maybe throw in the $40,000 grant from Empire State Development, which they're going to be giving to the commuter van guys to help them with insurance and maintenance and other
Yeah, I
types
mean,
of
but
costs.
that they do have those 40,000 grants, and I think the fund is like 10 or 11 million dollars.
You're right,
So,
yeah.
and then this also relates to the crisis at American Transit, and so it might be a good time
Yes.
to transition into talking about insurance. I mean, I think with the insurance industry, and I know a lot of the technicalities of the insurance industry, I think right now, fundamentally, what the regulators are trying to do is that to extract. So, okay, let's start with commuter vans and why insurance fundamentally doesn't work. The reason why commuter van insurance is not working is the insurance. There was an insurance company, I think the full background to it was Park Insurance was the dominant player in commuter van insurance. Park Insurance was actually liquidated. Then you have the sole player, let's say, insuring a lot of commuter vans, going bust. And I think there's another whole story with Park Insurance. Then these guys can't afford insurance. Then the pandemic happens. It's like it's like a perfect stew of, it's like apocalyptic. So then so commuter van insurance, fundamentally, with whether we're talking about American Transit or whoever's insuring any of these companies, it has to work for the insurance company. So right now in Florida, just like sometimes it's good to think an analogy. Like imagine trying to insure in Fort Myers, trying to insure a house over there. Like at the end of the day, like if a hurricane is going to hit twice a year and that's going to be the cost of it, like, is that insurable fundamentally? And how do you make it insurable? So starting with first principles about taxi and FHV insurance, I think you have to start with the first principles of insurance. And the first principles of insurance is that some part of the insurance market is driven by how good the driver is, and some part of the insurance market is just on the environment. So, for example, a hurricane is an environmental thing. Like, you can't prevent a hurricane. In the FHV sector, if you give insurance to a 20-year-old driver who just got his driver's license, let alone driving in New York City, who is underwriting that person? Because that's going to mess up the whole market and the claims market. And then the last point I'll make is you also have this litigious society we're living in. Lawsuit lending, the Wall Street Journal wrote about it, the New York Post editorial board wrote about it. I've been subject to a $50 million lawsuit in my own fleet on a nothing claim that, didn't end up anywhere. So there's so many different things that are happening with insurance. So I don't know which one you want to focus on, but I'll leave it to you guys.
Let me say something. And nobody wants to see for-hire vehicles of any kind. I mean, would be it a van, a taxi, an FHV, whatever. They don't want to see them disappear. Okay, the insurance companies are saying we're going broke. We can't make any money. Okay, and Carolyn, in her writing to me, mentioned what did she call it? Captive insurance companies. Okay, which is self-insurance. Okay, with the all of the vehicles that are out there for to help people get around, for hire vehicles, get together and form their own company. Okay, I
think that's what Uber does in Florida. In Florida, you just have regular people driving their own cars for Uber, and they have a special kind of insurance that just kicks in when they're on a job. The rest of the time, they just have their regular insurance.
That's actually across the country, Carolyn. That the outside
New
York City is
is
the only insurance market where Uber is actually the largest auto insurance customer in America. A lot of people actually don't know that. So they do have a captive insurance company, but they were required to make a captive insurance company. That's actually the real innovation of Uber outside of New York City, is that they facilitated this new kind of insurance product. Lyft also has a captive insurer. But if you actually look at their SEC filings, those insurance companies, insurance is a very capital intensive business that's actually low single digit margin. It's not a great business, although you're collecting a lot of premiums. How insurance companies make money is on like investment income. It's not on the underwriting profit, you know?
Right.
So
right.
if you look
I think they mentioned in their filings and in their balance sheet that this is possibly a very big liability that they hold, depending on how many accidents the drivers have.
There is a gigantic insurance company within Uber and Lyft. New York City is the one market where they might have an umbrella policy, but that's why they're suing American Transit. They're like, guys, you have to remember, New York City is so important to these companies because not only are they the biggest revenue market, they are, especially for Lyft, they are huge profit generators because of the insurance equation. And so when you're talking about, Abe, getting back to your point, and Carolyn, what you mentioned about the captive insurance company, I think that's a step in the right direction, but it's very hard to make a captive insurance. It's easy for like a large leasing company, which they do have captive insurance policies. For many individual drivers, you need an insurance company, unless you're expecting 10,000 drivers to reach out to an insurance company to create a captive. And a captive is basically, as you alluded to, is like the shareholders of the policies. The people who have the policies are the shareholders of the insurance company, right? And so you need an insurance company for all these long tail of individual drivers. What was happening is that American Transit was being allowed to operate at a fundamental, not even an underwriting, not in addition to an underwriting loss, an illiquid loss, which is beyond underwriting loss. A company can operate at an underwriting loss, but still have the reserves to make it a solvent company. This company was fundamentally insolvent. And the best way to simplify that is that if I start an insurance company today and I say, guys, I'm offering TLC liability insurance for $100 a month, I'm going to get 100% market share, right?
Right.
However, 5 years from now, I'm going to be in a federal jail. I'm going to be in jail. Do you know what I'm saying? Or not jail, or, I'll be like Sam Bankman-Fried or something, right? So, but that's the tricky thing with insurance. It's a fraud that only gets revealed like 3 to 5 years later because of the way the claims work. But that's why it's so regulated. So captive insurance, if the best way, what Abe, what you're saying, and Carolyn, you're saying is New York State is proposing like what Florida has for flood insurance, or like, isn't there FEMA? And I don't know if Florida has its own like state flood insurance thing, where they're basically saying that the taxi industry is subject to hurricanes that the free market can't solve for. So therefore the taxpayer must fund this insurance for this.
Right. And you know what else would solve this problem? Having less cars, less drivers, and higher fares. The fares are too cheap. Everybody shouldn't be able to afford to jump into a taxi or an FHV at any time they feel like doing it. It should be more expensive. But that's not going to happen. And it's unfortunately the FHV industry is used as a relief valve for unemployment. So every Tom, Dick, and Harry who lost their job feels, oh, well, I got a car, I can go do this. I'll drive for Uber. I'll get a few fares, and maybe I'll deliver some food for DoorDash or Uber or whatever. And that's how people get by. So it's become this, relief valve, unfortunately. And you have a lot of people who probably don't know what they're doing behind the wheel. I mean, it was a very different story 10 or 15 years ago. And I think as we get farther and farther away from that, drivers now don't realize that taxi drivers had $700 days. And I'm talking 12 years ago. They had $1 million asset that they were going to use for retirement, and they had $500 days, $600 days. When I hear city council people talk about the living wage as if that was some, wonderful, wonderful thing that they have attained for the slave labor that's basically driving these cars around. I mean, I laugh. It's a joke. Nobody bought a medallion and started driving a taxi to make, minimum wage. But I guess they think we should be grateful for that now.
And Abe, I like to how, in terms of when you say increasing fares, isn't there a way, like, shouldn't a taxi fare be accessible to a, however you want to define it? Obviously that term is thrown around a lot, a middle class person, or
no, it should be for emergencies, special occasions, and rich people.
That's your, I'm not of that opinion.
Rich people have their own limousines, and they control the driver.
No, most of them don't. I mean, in the lower seven figures, they don't have limousines.
Well, there is. I understand what you're saying by rich people that can't afford the higher price.
Right.
Okay, and it was. In my days, it was sort of that way.
Exactly.
I mean, look, I never had a day that I wasn't busy. I never had a day where I would ride around for 4 hours and not get a fare. I mean, like a friend of mine said that one man, a guy I work with, I used to say, well, how's business today? And he'd say, you got to beat them off with a stick because you can't get away from them. You gotta lock the doors and make sure they don't get in if you want to take a break. Okay.
Guys, if I just can interject, I mean, I think you're kind of outlining, if people are going to listen to this, they're going to outline is, you know what? I'm glad Uber came in and took a hammer to this industry, if that's the
right. That doesn't mean that
it's so good for the passengers. They had to be able to walk out of their door and have a taxi waiting for them wherever they are. Okay, but there has to be a point where the drivers have to make enough money. And I'm not talking about the small money. I'm talking about a decent amount of money to live. More
not minimum wage.
Not minimum
well,
wage.
Carolyn, I agree. The point you're making is a very valid point, that driving a taxi in New York should not be a, flipping a burger job. That, in terms of earnings, I 100% agree with that. Where I have a disagreement is that I don't think the reason is that it's because the fares are not high enough. I think it's because there are too many cars. The fare.
Oh yeah, no. I mean, of course, a taxi should be doing between 30 and 50 fares a day, depending on whether it's single or double shifted. Period. End of story. All the rest is just nonsense. I mean, again, let's go back 12, 13 years. Let's look at the different segments. Black car drivers. You're a cooperator within the cooperative organization. You owned shares. You had a nice job. You didn't have to work too hard. You had wealthy clients, high fares, people like Goldman Sachs, some of the big banks. When you decided to leave the industry, you could sell your radio, maybe for around $50,000. Again, this is like 12, 13 years ago. That was a lot more money than it is now. I think the livery guys there was certainly a lot more livery guys around. They were making a living. Taxi drivers were making a living. So what is it that changed 12 or 13 years ago? The market was flooded with, another 70,000 vehicles.
And the way to get around was slowed down. Okay. I mean, they're talking about 2 lanes on Fifth Avenue. Come on. I mean, these people don't.
Yeah. I can also make a case that the way that Uber and Lyft work is when you drive down the amount of pay that drivers are getting, then they become eligible for all kinds of government programs, whether it's, food stamps or subsidized rent or Medicaid or whatever, so that it's not the taxpayer is subsidizing the companies. I don't begrudge somebody who's poor getting government benefits at all. But another way to look at it is that these programs subsidized Uber and Lyft because those drivers couldn't drive for them if they weren't getting these other benefits.
Yeah, no, I think how you're framing it now, I'm much more in agreement with. I don't think the fares being more expensive will have the reverse effect. Fares should be what like the fares can be dictated by obviously the minimum wage standard, but also the free market. I think the issue is not that like instead of someone paying $20 for a ride, they should be paying $40 so the driver gets paid more. Because what inherently will happen is there'll just be less trips, and it'll be like a a doom loop of kind of thing. What I'm saying is that the first principle of the issue, and I think we've all been consistent on this, is that utilization. That's what you're talking about, basically. You're saying that 30 to 50 fares a day, the price of the fare can be the same, but the utilization has to go up. That is the reason why this job, however they want to spin it, when I talk about like the regulator, I think David Doe was asked by the city council. I'm not sure if you saw that. He's like, I think Salvana Brooks Powers asked him, like, do you think adding 10,000 cars impacted the utilization? And he said, that's a very good question, but the answer is no. It's like, how in the hell is the answer no? Like, what? Like, doesn't make any sense. Like on mathematics.
No, that's magical thinking, and that's how they indulge themselves. Because I guess they've been told, that that's the party line, and they hold that line.
You know what needs to happen, and hopefully, like podcasts like this happens. Savannah Brooks Powers need to be like, timeout. You added 10,000 cars. The trips didn't go up by that amount. Please explain to me in a mathematical with just simple logic how that didn't impact utilization. And if you can't explain that, right, then I'm gonna go to the mayor and ask him why you were appointed. And I think it's important now to, like, we've been harsh about this. Remember, almost a year ago, we had a podcast about David Doe to taxis, drop dead, right? In that podcast, I said, all these guys think they're invincible, right? Whether it was Cuomo, whether it was Spitzer, whether it was Sheldon Silver. I said, all these guys think they're invincible till they're not. Where are we today? Adams is on the absolute, I mean, I don't even understand how he's still in office. And let's see what happens. I'm not saying his replacement's going to be better. Also, to be fair to him, he's innocent until proven guilty, right? And also was like, if it was just upgrades on an airline ticket and stuff, I'm not sure that's the smoking gun. But what I did observe, right, is that you had EV interests come into the market legally. They were the biggest lobbyists, and boom, magically 10,000 EV license gets issued, right? And so they need to be held accountable. We said it back then, we'll say it again. And I think people are getting a little too afraid of speaking about them. Oh, they're the regulator, they're the mayor. They are paid by us. They're paid by TLC drivers, fees, licenses, inspections. Think about all the money these guys are making. So we have to have a limit on nonsense and incompetence. And when he said that, I was just like, for example, let me continue this rant. He said there were predatory leasing companies. In articles I wrote, I said, okay, there probably are some predatory leasing companies. Let's create FHV lease caps. An FHV lease cap bill was introduced. He said, oh, no, we can't support that because it's too hard to figure out the price of a lease.
Because there's too many different types of cars, so we wouldn't be able to figure it out.
Okay, that's fine. But how in the heck are you saying in one hand, you're saying they're charging too much. On the other hand, we're saying we're not sure what the right price is. This is bonkers. This is nuts. And
I think it's good if they charge too much, because anything you can do to discourage people from entering this industry is a good thing. I don't even care how you do it. And just do it somehow so that some people go away. And, it's interesting. You had the podcast with the IDG people, and you spent about a half an hour discussing Intro 276. That's the bill regarding deactivations and who would handle it and how it would be handled. That would be handled through New York City government. What's happening now, it's handled through an IDG process, which wouldn't necessarily go away. It wouldn't be illegal, but if they make it a city process, I guess more people would gravitate to that. But what Greenblatt said was, just forget about all this other nonsense. Bottom line, there'll be less drivers. because medallion owners want to have less drivers, and so they'll be driven to the yellow industry. But then a half an hour later, he says, well, we need to limit the number of licenses given to drivers. Well, doesn't that also result in less drivers, Andrew? So I'm saying what he's saying is nonsense.
I think,
He's
yeah, I mean, I think
himself.
what on that podcast, and obviously he's a smart guy and he'll lobby for his interests as is expected.
Yeah, but he's contradicting himself.
Yeah, I think when where I disagreed with him, but it's important, you know, in that podcast to let him enunciate his opinion, is I said, if there's 180,000 TLC licensed drivers currently, and there's demand for not even although there's 117,000 active vehicles, there's probably only a demand for 100,000. So if you're saying that cap the licenses today, I said, okay, I understand the concept. Like, okay, make the license more expensive, like change the paradigm to look more like the knowledge or some other markets, right? Which is, it's very complicated. The other elements, practical elements of that, the issue with some of these ideas, what I'm saying is, if I said that, hey guys, you know what we should do? Let's rebuild New York City. So like the East Side has a park like the West Side. It's like, oh, that's a great idea. It's like, that's such, okay, the idea is good, but it's not an implementable idea. Do you know what I'm saying?
Wait, again, let's go back 12 to 13 years. Was there a cap on driver's licenses for TLC vehicles? No, there was not. And yet, everybody was making money then. What was the difference? There were 50,000 cars on the road, not 117,000.
Well, his point is what he's trying to say is, he's saying that instead of putting values on the cars.
Yes, I know, I understand, but I'm saying you already had a system that worked, and you didn't limit driver's licenses. But then somebody, I think it was Michelle, who said, well, you know, you could have it so that the drivers could, you know, work for yellow, that there wouldn't be a limitation on yellow licenses. Well, they're not going to do it that way. I know they're not going to do it that way, because all of a sudden everybody will be similarly situated. When it suits them, we're not similarly situated. When it doesn't suit them, we aren't similarly situated. That would be great if you could limit FHV licenses and encourage yellow license. That would be fantastic, but they're not going to do that.
You know, and I want to get I'll tee this up. Like, what's really interesting is during that podcast, and I appreciated the podcast, but during that podcast, they're like, I used the example. I said, okay, let's say you had a magic wand and you limited the TLC driver's licenses like today. I said, what if like the new immigrant comes to New York and he wants to drive a TLC? And then their answer, reasonably, to be fair to them, was like, well, that guy, like, he has to understand that there's not like infinity driver jobs. So I said, okay, using that logic.
Okay, now. Okay.
Yeah, I think I hit my wire. The issue with that is then I said, okay, you have a new immigrant, they come to New York, they want to do Uber. And I agree with what they said. They said, well, listen, there's like, you can't just expect like an Uber job waiting for you in New York City, right? That's reasonable. But then I said that you're saying that tough luck to that guy. What I'm saying is that in 1990 or 1995, when a taxi medallion owner bought a medallion, made the investment in the franchise, right? Spent all that money and made an investment. You're basically, I'm saying this in a bad way. What I'm saying is that you're saying that, well, today's paradigm is the correct paradigm and the old paradigm is incorrect. So we should memorialize the new paradigm. And yes, the medallion owners, too bad for them, tough luck. But we should memorialize today's paradigm.
Right. And in today's paradigm, they said towards the end of the podcast that we want to lift the drivers up to be middle class. Okay. Once again, let's go back 12, 13 years ago. Individual medallion owner drivers were in the middle class. We already had a paradigm for that. They had savings, they had a pension, and they had a good income. Now nobody has any of that anymore. What changed? He flooded the market with 70,000 more cars. It's really not that complicated. The other thing I thought was so funny was when they, you know, stressed how wonderful they were that they have mental health benefits for drivers. What kind of fakakta industry did you create that drivers need to have mental health counseling? You know what you could do to help mental health? Have $1 million medallion and $700 days. All your unhappiness goes away, I guarantee it. I mean, they're just, you know what I think their problem is? They think that people are stupid. They think drivers are stupid. They think people who live in New York are stupid. I've been in on some of the congestion pricing hearings, and people are wise to them. They said, look, we have congestion because there's so many damn Ubers in the streets. Everybody knows it. These aren't medallion owners speaking at these hearings. It's just regular people. I mean, they know what they see with their own eyes, you know, instead of this load of crap that we're supposed to believe that the TLC and Uber keeps putting out there. I don't know. I'm disgusted.
No, I think what you're spitting your own truth, and I think what you said has a lot of validity. It's a very legitimate perspective. I think what you're making a good point is like the best way to solve mental health is for financial stability. There was financial stability. You make everybody financially unstable, and then you offer mental health services.
Right.
It's like not addressing the first principles of the issue.
What she's saying is, if you go out and work a day in a taxi cab and come home with $5, you're going nuts. All right.
Okay, so like I'm trying,
but if you could go to work and make $200-300 for the day, then you're not crazy. You feel good, and you want to pat people on the back and say, how can I help you?
Abe, let me ask you. You drove for so long, like throughout your career, and you exited at just before the disruption occurred. Was there ever a time, at any time through the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, the early 2000s, where you weren't making, you wish you could make more money, but were you making like a strong wage throughout that time?
Yes, I was doing very well.
Throughout that through all the recessions, through all the different interest rates, through everything.
Look, there's 365 days to the year, you know, and you're not going to have a good day every single day because things are going to happen. You know, you might have a flat tire, you know, and you waste 2-3 hours, okay, or some crazy thing happens, or you get stuck in traffic for an hour and a half, you know. But all in all, you would go to work, you would work 10-12 hours and be very happy with the money you made and go home.
And Carolyn, I know you said your husband used to work for I assume it's a similar experience for him.
Yeah, there's a line in a Toby Keith song, all the happiness in the world won't buy you money. And I think it's relevant to our discussion. I mean, they keep destroying the industry, destroying driver income, and then trying to like patch it together to throw a few crumbs here and there when we already know what works. And you know what? Forget about yellow cabs. Maybe they should just eliminate all yellow cabs. I mean, I don't know. Whatever it is that you have, you need to have much less of them. And that's going to solve a lot of problems. Yeah. I just wanted to say one thing about Adams, the alleged corruption scandal that's swirling around him. They're really, the guys who you don't see at the top of the food chain are really out to get him. And I don't think it's because of the stuff that's been uncovered so far. I don't really think New Yorkers are pretty cynical. I don't really think they would care if the city was functioning. But I saw that Carrie Cohn has been brought out to go after him. She's like a combined assassin and cleaner-upper that they bring out when they really, really, really want to get rid of somebody. She's with Morrison and Forrester, which in some capacity is or was Uber's lawyer.
If she
she's a lawyer.
If she ever comes after us, we should be worried, basically.
Yeah, well, her specialty is to go after government people that they want to get rid of. For instance, she went after Ruben Diaz Sr., who was a city council member from the Bronx, who was the chair of the FHV committee. I think they disbanded that and threw him off that in, I think it was 2018. Now, he had some very good ideas for how to fix the industry, and there have been many good ideas, but they've all been rejected. He had a plan, $2,000 fee per annum for each Uber, Lyft, Juno, whatever driver. Again, to thin out the herd. You would have to be dispatched a minimum of 10 trips a day by Uber or whoever was dispatching to you. and no cross-base dispatching. I'm not sure if you had no cross-category dispatching. I don't remember. But that would have thinned out the herd, which is what you want to do. So, of course, that got absolutely no traction. And then the next thing you knew, he's being accused, I think, of being anti-LGBTQ, HIJ, Carolyn, and a P. You can't do that because I think he said gay people were controlling or in positions of power in city government, blah, blah, blah. I mean, they can always find some reason to go after you. And it wasn't just him. Carrie Cullen was hired as outside counsel. Like when they hire her, you're in trouble. So she's been hired to go after, I don't know if she's been hired, but there was a talk that was given, I think it was October 15th, a panel discussion on all the controversy swirling around Mayor Adams. And she was there talking about it. So, I mean, she also got rid of Councilmember Grudenchik, Andy King, and there was another one. In other words, anybody who was the least bit sympathetic to the yellow industry was gotten rid of. I mean, that's how things really work. When you're looking at low-level people like David Doe or, even the mayor, they're like the bottom feeders. There are people above them and then a whole other layer above them that you don't see. Like all this electrification, BS with the chargers and Revel and charging stations, that came from Washington. That came from the Biden administration, Jennifer Granholm, the Secretary of Energy, and Pete Buttigieg, and, those people. It's not the bottom feeders that you see scurrying around in New York City.
Well,
They're probably not even worth talking to.
My main thing with this is that, and I even said this on the IDG podcast, is that as long as someone's being straightforward about what they're about, and basically what I'm saying is like, don't sell me a popsicle and say, it's ice cream. It's like, if you're selling a popsicle, like, tell me it's a popsicle, And I think with a lot of these people, they're like, in that specific example, because it's easy to tie, is that they released the electric vehicle licenses, and the number one industry that was targeted was leasing companies, an industry I know very well, an industry where I know a lot of people in that industry. They're saying that we have to release the electric vehicle licenses because of the, expletive leasing companies, right? And what I'm saying is that, okay, if that was true, that's like, what gets me upset about that is if you want to release electric vehicle licenses because you believe in an electric future, just say that. Like, just say that that's the reason you want to release it. And then we can have a debate. If you're saying these licenses must be released because there's a predatory industry, no, you just can't demonize someone without evidence. And then full circle, when the question is, when a bill is literally introduced that says, let's cap the companies that you accused of being predatory, then you say, we can't do the math, so we're against the bill? How in the heck does that make any sense? And to your point, like, yeah, I mean, we're all, David Doe's a pawn, we're like a pawn's pawn or whatever, but what we're saying is that this is America. This is New York. And the reason New York is because there's a lot of outspoken people here. Like, we're not idiots over here. And so they should be called out. I'm not saying that everything we say, and I think everybody knows this. It's not like all of our opinions, we expect, them to obey every command, but don't treat us like idiots. And I feel like there's a little bit of that going on. And that's the offensive part to me, personally. It's like, don't treat me like I'm a moron. Like, if you want to do something, just be straightforward about it. Now, that's asking a lot, perhaps, but I feel like it's important for people like us to call out. And maybe that's a good way to transition into a very technical subject that probably the TLC needs to address, which is the Taxi Improvement Fund.
Yes, I was just looking at that, and I see that you outlined the revenue and expenditures in the TIF fund for 2023. And there is a $2 million and change shortfall between what they took in and what was paid out. So we can presume, well, depending on how many wave vehicles there are, I mean, with what they're doing, you might get less because it might be pushing on a string and people may just leave the industry and fold their tent and just go away. So we don't really know what's going to happen. But what interested me more? The $4.5 million that's spent in 1 year on accessible dispatch costs, that's $40,000 a person. There's only 100 people. There's 200 trips a day. So I'm going to assume that's 100 people because they probably do a round trip, right? That's $40,000 a person. Or we could look at it another way. 73,000 trips in a year done by accessible dispatch taxis. That's $61 a trip. If we divide $4.5 million by 73,000 trips, that's $61 a trip in administrative costs. I think we just buy each of those, 100 people a car, a nice wheelchair accessible car, automatic, autonomous driven, of course.
It has to be wheelchair, hydrogen powered, and autonomous. That's the requirement.
Right. It has to be able to levitate. That's the other thing. I mean, the thing is, in all these discussions on the wave issue, including in the court, I mean, they never go into what is the demand. I mean, generally in public policy, before you add a service, you try to figure out what's the demand. Do we really need this or not? What is the demand? It's 100 people a day. It's nothing. Why do you need thousands and thousands of wheelchair accessible cabs for 100 people a day? Come on.
Speaking of that, I wanted to say, what do you think is going to happen now that you can't do anything but a wheelchair accessible car for a yellow cab, which in my mind says, why are only the yellow cabs being picked on?
Yeah, I think some of the guys who are just hanging on, by their fingernails, trying to keep the non-accessible car going for another year or whatever, which evidently I guess now isn't going to be allowed. I think some of those guys will just go away. They're probably guys in their 60s, 70s. I think maybe I don't know. We'll see what happens.
They're never going to achieve their goal.
Right.
Going away, okay? And 10 years from now, just like now, which is 10 years from then, or whatever. What's going to happen here?
And this is actually a huge deal. Like, this is a massive deal. This thing that was just passed. Now, we just criticized the TLC. Now, to be balanced, the TLC did try to argue this in court, saying that this mandate was excessive, that it was 2% in 2014, it's 40% now. You have the accessible FHVs, but they lost in court. So when we need the TLC to perform for the industry, they fail. It's like they're just losers over here.
It's interesting. The lawyers for the city, and I read some of their papers. They said, we can't guarantee how many wheelchair accessible vehicles are going to be out there. And we can't even guarantee that there's going to be any taxis at all of any kind out there. Kind of casting doubt on the whole idea of a taxi. That's what their own lawyers said.
I think to your point, Carolyn, the earlier point is that this is really bad because you said a lot of people are holding on by their fingernails because they had their non-wave cars, and then there was a vehicle retirement. They extended for 6 months. Which, I mean, whatever. But what's going to happen is we were just seeing this medallion industry. It's just so crazy to me. Like, again, I don't own a medallion, but like, it's almost like seeing someone just like wither away or something. It's like a very sad thing, and it's the
right, by neglect.
An icon.
Right. It's like I didn't murder the kid. I just didn't feed it properly.
You're seeing someone bleed out,
and then it died.
You're basically observing someone bleed out, and you're like, what are they doing? And so in October, getting back to, they released those 10,000 cars. Of course, releasing 10,000 cars didn't affect utilization according to the TLC anyways. So they did that. Then we had the discussion that, Dawood Taxi dropped dead. Taxi industry fought back. The union filed a lawsuit. Yeah, it's hard to kill the New York City yellow cab. I think we can say that. Now, here's another punch that was thrown. To be fair to the TLC, they try to argue against this. That is a 24 settlement. It is ultimately a federal court order, so there's only so much they can do. But this undoubtedly is it could have the impact of reducing the number of cabs, reducing the recovery. And then the only thing that could potentially counteract that is the TIF funds. If you give enough people financial grants, okay, that could help someone transition. But if the TIF funds aren't there, the tax improvement funds aren't there, for just normal it's just like, once again, who's auditing the management of the TIF funds, who's running the TIF funds? And again, to be fair, this is not all on David Doe. This is stemming back 10 years. It's also on people above his pay grade too. But this is a big deal.
Let me ask you this: what is the drop on the meter now? Or how much money do they have to pay before the driver gets 1 penny?
I think the answer is like, because with congestion fee, it was going to go up to $8. So congestion was going to be $125. So $8 minus $125. I think it's like, I have to triple check this, but I think it's probably between $5 and $6 or something like that, because you have I think it's going to be that.
Okay, so if you're going to raise the tip thing, then that's going to get higher, right?
No, they already
No, the
tripled.
TLC
They
said they
tripled
have
the TIF.
right, but they say they have no plans to increase it in their latest report.
But they already tripled the TIF 2 years ago.
Yes,
It was 30 cents a surcharge.
Right.
They've
Now
increased
it's
it to $1.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, let me ask you this: are they going to allow the wheelchair cars to be used? In other words, put used cars into the mix.
I think they've passed a rule. There's so many rules being passed, but I think it's like basically lightly used. Like it can be a 1 model year. It can't be like a 5-year-old used car on the first hackup.
But you know, we're not. Look, I'm going to go back to the 1970s now. Okay, we were allowed. There were actually businesses that were selling used police cars for taxis. Okay. And, you know, so you didn't always have to buy a new car. You could always buy, the police have to change their cars, within a year or 2 years. So all of these cars were available to be taxis. Okay. So what could they do to do the same thing with the accessible cars? Okay. That's my question. Could they set it up so that you could buy a used accessible car?
Yeah, to be fair to them, they have passed rules that allow for not only used accessible cars, but as long as it keeps on passing the inspection, it can go beyond the 7 years. So they've done that. I just want to quickly mention the initial fare. This is it, just so I have the facts right. You have a $3 initial charge. You have a $1 improvement surcharge. I think that's the TIF surcharge. That's $4. Then you have a $1 overnight surcharge from 8 p.m. to 6 p.m. So in that instance, that's a $5. But if it's a rush hour surcharge, that's $2.50. So in rush hour, it's 4 plus 250. So I think I hope I'm doing this right. That's $5.50. And if it's non-rush hour, it looks like it might be, I'm sorry, then there's a 50% MTA surcharge. Okay, so it's between it depends on rush hour or not rush hour, but it's looking like it's between $4 to $6. I just want to make sure I got my facts right.
Okay, so if I want to go 10 blocks, it'll cost me like $12.
Probably, yeah. I take a lot of yellow cabs. And by the way, everybody always forgets about the green cabs. I mean, they're demolished at this point. But to answer your question, Abe, they have passed through. They have definitely passed rules that allow for the use of used waves, but not like 8-year-old used waves. Like it's like 1-year-old used waves or something like that.
Somebody's in the business. The car is 3 years old and they want to get out. Okay.
Can I just point out that this is all Mirazoshi's fault? We got to go back, 10, 12 years. She was general counsel at the TLC. And that was when the original lawsuit started by the disability people that they wanted to have more wheelchair accessible taxis. and she made, I believe, the settlement, although maybe she was
Okay,
told to make the settlement. So this goes back to Mirazoshi. According to the ADA at that point, taxis were exempt from having to be wheelchair accessible. Then there was some confusion because of the type of car that was going to be used for yellow taxis. Was the Nissan a van? Because maybe vans had to be wheelchair accessible. So that was a little blurry. But the thing is, we didn't have to be wheelchair accessible. We were exempt, and she made the settlement.
How do we correct it? That's what I want to know. This is in
What?
the past. You know, you can't go back and
Right, but I'm saying that's how this. You know, when something like that happens,
I'll
and
tell
then
you
it
how
just
to
keeps
correct.
rolling.
I'll tell you guys how to correct it. You need to significantly increase yellow cab trips. That is how you correct.
Yeah,
right.
Because
Right.
you get the TIF surcharge. The reason why this is also
Yeah.
this is why it's so why you need a regulator who can think holistically.
yeah.
The reason the TIF funds are a big reason is if the taxi trips drop from 500,000 to, again, this is like simple math. You don't need a GED for this math.
Right.
You know,
Right.
if the taxi trips, I mean, you guys know what I'm going with. So the way to solve it, Abe, is that you need to increase yellow cab trips. Now it's circular back to what we always talk about. How do you increase yellow cab trips? You got to limit the cars.
Getting
You gotta,
rid of all of those cars out there that ruined it for us. Okay.
This is the craze. This is what I'm saying. Like everything we speak about, like it's so mutual. Everything relates to everything else. And a lot of people view this very few people understand like, oh, the TIF is not funded because the thing that got the surcharge, fundamentally the trips are down 50%.
Right.
I wonder
Yeah.
if in the 1800s, if the wagons, with the four horses in front, taking people around, if they had insurance.
You know what was interesting? At that time, most of the drivers were black. And then the industry was overtaken by Irish immigrants who came in, and I don't know how they did it exactly.
So you're saying
Probably
if a horse stepped on you, was there a claim you could make, basically?
Yeah. Well, did they have any accessible coaches? Okay.
Well, I mean, back then, that was a whole different. Talking about paradigms, that was a whole different paradigm back then.
Did they have an ambulance where you had one horse and the bed? He was pulling a bed.
I mean, in all seriousness, I think, and I know, and we're obviously just, shooting the shit over here, but in all seriousness, I know everybody, like, of course, like there should be accessible, like, of course, that's what everybody aims for. But I think that, and even by the way, a disability advocate came on the public hearing and she said that the TIF, like she's like, we don't want to bankrupt anybody, like she appreciates that.
Well, yeah, but that's what you're doing.
Yeah, I know. We're already
and talk is very cheap. It's easy to say, oh, we really like medallion owners and we wouldn't want to do anything to harm them. But yeah, but look at the actions and then look at the results. And who are these 100 people? That's what I want to know. Who are these 100 people that are getting subsidized $40,000 a piece? To have wheelchair. I remember we once asked Mirazoshi, we said years ago, there's no demand for wheelchair accessible cabs. And she said, oh, that's because there's not enough of them on the street. You'll see after we put more of them out there, then that will induce more demand.
Well, I think, you know what it is? I think it's the concept is kind of like if you go to a hamburger joint and it's like kosher meat, that doesn't impact you. But it also like, it's not something that you're not going to not eat kosher. I think how they thought, remember that at that time, like the NV200 was going to be the taxi of tomorrow, and the NV200 is going to be easier to convert to accessibility. I think what they viewed it as is that, okay, the taxi of tomorrow is anyways going to be accessible. So we'll agree to this. The medallion owners have $1 million. They can easily buy this. I mean, they made all these decisions from like 2011 to 2014, from the green cab, from this settlement to everything, just on the precipice of everything then collapsing. So
right, because they didn't maintain and protect the franchise. Now, had they protected the franchise, I don't think people would be so reluctant to do all these things that they're trying to make us do. But they didn't protect it. They basically threw us away and then imposed, a bunch of horrible rules on us. And at the same time, providing all kinds of subsidies to the other side. Like this new Green Power Authority that's being created in Albany. That's going to be like the MTA or the Thruway. It's going to be this huge thing that's going to subsidize electric vehicle purchases by for-hire vehicle drivers. That's all over New York State. I mean, this is huge. I don't know exactly how much money. Well, I guess the sky is the limit. As they've decided that they need to subsidize electric vehicles because the drivers aren't going to take it on themselves. And then I also noticed in the city council there's a resolution 576 introduced by Amanda Farias, who's always involved with for-hire vehicles and taxis. Resolution calling on New York State legislature to introduce and pass and the governor to sign legislation amending the tax law to authorize the city of New York to offer a tax credit for businesses to incentive the creation of workforce development and training programs for newly arrived immigrants. Drivers, maybe? Is that where this is going? I would bet it is. I mean, it doesn't say, but that'll be another subsidy.
Listen, let's end this.
Are we done? Okay.
Okay, we're well over the hour mark.
Enough bad news for one day.
Yeah.
I'll end on a good note. I do still think, and I'm kind of developing this pretty large, extensive article about the medallion industry and what Marblegate is doing, and there's some big news on that. They recently asked for an extension, and potentially there's an SEC filing where their SPAC could be asked to be delisted, but they're appealing that. So I'll be writing about that soon, and maybe on the next podcast we can talk about that. I do think, this sounds crazy, I do think there is a recovery still for I'm still of that opinion. And let's see.
They can't kill us. They've been trying to kill us for years, and we're still breathing, and we're going to continue to breathe. Okay, one way or another, this will get worked out. Okay, that's my feeling. I just hate to see all this going on. I mean, the city of New York, they don't have to do all of this nonsense. Okay. I mean, this one wants this and the other one wants that, and you can't appease everyone. You have to figure out how to at least, let everyone breathe.
That's okay? Like a song. You just wrote the lyrics to a song, Abe, I think.
Well, I wish I could get the money for a #1 hit. All right. Okay. Okay. Listen, I want to thank everybody for listening to us, three cuckoos. Okay. It's fun. Okay. It's fun for us. And Dawood's a good guy, and Carolyn is the genius here. She knows everything. And I'm enjoying myself, retired from not driving anymore. But I'll always be yellow. I bleed yellow, and I'm going to stay yellow.
Abe, you want to show the people your shirt?
Oh, yeah. There we go. Drive yellow. Yeah. Okay. And I have my other shirt here. Oops, I just dropped it. My other shirt here. NYC Taxi News. Okay. What can I say? All right. And the rates. It belongs on the door of the taxis. Get it back. I mean, that's one of the things that started the mess back in 12 years ago, whatever, when they
That's only going to continue, because I think they just passed that the flex fare program shall be permanent because it's so wonderful.
Well, then put it on the door.
You can't if it's flex fares, because the fare would vary.
You put the rates on the door. If you don't know what
there are no rates with flex fares. It's upfront pricing.
If you don't know what the rate is in numbers, then say it on the door. Put it all on the door so that people know that a taxi is a taxi, okay, and not an Uber or whatever they got out there now. Who knows? And all of the cars that are probably phony. Okay.
On that note, I think we'll end it there. That's a
Yes.
good note to end on. Put the thing on the door.
All right.
But no, this is great, guys. Thanks a lot, and we'll do it again next. The next time we do this, the election will be over, so I'm sure we'll have a lot to talk about.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, because
I'm not
that's going to
gonna tell you-
affect the taxi
I'm not going
business
to tell you
probably.
who not to vote for. All right.